Welcome, welcome, welcome. Depending on where you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Try to cover all the bases there. This is Move America's Acquisition Strategy webinar. My name is Rick. Last name is O, as in, oh my goodness, that looks like somebody spilled a box of alphabets on the floor. I'm your host, your moderator, and if things go sideways today, I'm your fall guy. So today we have titled our session Concept to Contract, Designing Technology Roadmaps, Aiding in Tech Transfer, which, let's be honest, sounds like something you read on a government PowerPoint slide at 3 in the afternoon when you're one bad coffee away from a nap. But I promise you, this is the stuff that separates the companies that win contracts from the companies that are still wondering why their great idea didn't even get past the gate. And I'm going to tell you right now to walk us through it. I've got two gentlemen who live and breathe this world. First up, we've got Dr. Christophe McCray. He is Move America's Director of Technology. Christophe is the guy who looks at a piece of emerging tech and knows whether it's ready for the big leagues or it needs to still be riding the bench. So think of him as kind of like the Simon Cowell of technology readiness levels. If your TRL isn't ready, he'll tell you, but nicer and without that snarky British accent. Christophe, welcome. Introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Director of Technology, thank you for having me.
Excellent. And then we've got Mr. Kenyata Wesley, Senior, our Senior Acquisition Strategist. That's two seniors, sir. I think you're only allowed one. I'll have to check on that with the government. Now, if Christophe tells you whether your technology is ready, Kenyata tells you how to actually get it bought. He's the guy who reads every page of the FAR so you don't have to. And if you have read every page of the FAR voluntarily, Kenyata, we need to talk about your hobbies, my friend. Kenyata, please welcome and introduce yourself.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Kenyata Wesley. As told, I am the Senior Acquisition Strategist here at Move America. And I've been fortunate to work in some distinguished roles, both on the government side and in industry. So I'm just happy to be here and happy to share anything I can to be helpful.
Thank you much, sir. And we are thrilled to have you with us. All right, folks. So here's what we're doing today. We're going from concept to contract. We're going to start with why technology roadmaps matter. Spoiler, they matter a lot. Then we're going to get into acquisition strategies, store selection plans, and how to decode those contract sessions that read like they were written by lawyers in a dare, which they probably kind of were. Now, before we get started on all of that, I have to let you know that Move America is headquartered in the lovely state of Maryland, home of Blue Crabs, Old Bay, and what's known as two-party consent. Now, that means that you are on a recorded webinar, even though your microphones are muted and your cameras are off, because quite frankly, we don't need to hear what you're getting delivered from Amazon. Your postman doesn't need to ring twice, and your pet should not be climbing up on your keyboard and staring straight into the camera so that we could see up its nose. However, while your microphone is muted and your camera is off, you are still part of a recorded webinar because we are recording this session. That means that by staying on this webinar, you are giving your consent to be part of a recorded session. So I'm going to go ahead. Anybody who doesn't want to be part of a recorded session, go ahead and drop off now. We certainly don't take offense. We're not going to call Tay-Tay and tell her to write a song about you, about the breakup. It's going to be just fine. But you will have to drop off now. So I'll give you a few seconds to make that decision. If you do drop off, we'll make sure that you get the recording link, which is going to be posted up to our YouTube channel. All right, so I'm going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, thank you for those of you that are sticking around. That means it's time to grab your coffee, grab your notepad, and let's go ahead and get into it. Next slide, please. All right, so again, we're going to start off with Christophe McCray. Christophe, let's set the stage here. We're looking at the Department of War, and I know some of you just did a double take on that name, but they're planning to invest around $2.4 trillion across their portfolio. That's trillion with a T, and that's not a typo. That's enough money to buy every NFL team, every NBA team, and still have enough left over to fund a mission to Mars and a pretty solid Costco run. Here's the gut punch. Major defense systems are averaging about 12 years to reach initial operating capacity. 12 years. My kids will graduate high school faster than some of these programs reach IOC. So I have to say, the question is, and this is what keeps people up at night, if innovation isn't the problem, what is? Christophe, tell us what's going wrong between the brilliant idea and the actual capability.
So let me just go back a little and begin by defining what initial operating capacity is. And really, that's the point where military capability is first fielded and available for operational use, but the capability is not at planned strength or ability. And this is where we are after 12 years for some of these programs. An example might be where you have an air platform or something like that that has been tested and is considered, it gets considered that it can be done in certain operations, but the software is still evolving or the infrastructure has not been completed, and so it's not operating at its full planned strength. So I just want to make sure the initial operating capacity, we understand that. Now, going back to your original question regarding innovation. So innovation is everywhere. The US ranks in the top 5 countries globally in innovation. I think we're number 3. We are unable to align these technological innovations with acquisition. This is sometimes due to the rapid pace of rushing technology into acquisition programs before they are ready. An example which we could use is the middle tier of acquisition programs. This is a program that has been built for speed to rapidly prototype and field capabilities. However, have they been seeing, however, if you have technology not ready for the big show, not really aligned, you tend to have costly delays, scope creep, and you have a lot of scheduling problems. So throughout this briefing, you're going to see alignment. Aligning your technology to the program is key.
Excellent. So, basically to put a bow on that, it's not that we're short of good ideas, right? We're short on good alignment. It's like having a world-class quarterback who can't get the snap count right.
That's a good way to say it.
Yes. Remember, folks, the talent is there, but if your execution is out of sync, that's exactly what technology roadmaps are designed to fix, which, leads us right into the next thing we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead to the next slide. And again, we're going to talk about technology road mapping. So Christophe, let's define our terms here, because I think technology roadmap is one of those phrases that everybody nods along to in meetings, but half the room is secretly Googling under the table. And for those of you Googling right now, I do appreciate you, but stay with us. We're going to explain this to you. So what exactly is a technology roadmap in this context, and why should a small business pursuing a government contract even care about one?
So if you start from a very high level, technology roadmap is a structured, time-bound process which will aids an organization, an agency, a company in reaching a technological goal that helps benefit them. If you bring that down to the Department of War, it's a strategic planning process aligning technology development with needed defense capabilities and system requirements. So it's really a methodological way of helping decision makers and stakeholders translate innovations into acquisition language. So in the world of development, we tend to see complex systems fail or become unnecessarily costly when technology required capabilities and acquisition timing are not aligned. And we see this continuously in studies. When I was going through and just refreshing a few things, we see continuously, especially in the last few years, that in absence of disciplined road mapping, it directly correlates with cost growth, schedule slips, and immature tech getting pushed into programs prematurely. And that's what it is.
Excellent. Now, I got to say, I love when you talk about stuff like translate innovations into acquisition language, because that's the money line right there, right? I've seen brilliant founders come in with incredible technology, but they can't explain it to an engineer in 10 seconds flat, right? But if you ask them to explain to a contracting officer in terms that map to a solicitation, it's crickets, right? The roadmap is that translation layer. So thanks so much for explaining that. Now, Christophe, you and I have talked many times before, great colleagues, and you've said something in the past that's really stuck with me. You talk about a roadmap not just being a plan, it's that whole governance instrument. And I thought, that sounds important and slightly intimidating, like something a judge would hand down. So can you break down governance instrument for us? Let's go to the next slide. We want to find out what are the layers of a good technology roadmap, and we want to know why calling it a governance instrument really matters.
So yeah, this slide really captures it. Looking at roadmaps from a few key questions: why, what, how, with what, and when. So if we begin with the capability or mission driver, why does this effort exist? The why defines the operational problem to be solved or strategic advantage to be achieved. You need this type of clarity downstream because if you start planning this, that's where all of this is going to flow from. From the mission driver flows the requirement definition of what. And this translates strategic intent into measurable operation needs, performance thresholds, and functional objectives. It's going to define what must be delivered to satisfy the capability gap, but does not prescribe how the delivery will occur. And then we've got how. And how is really talking about, through the maturity plan, how you're going to get there. It defines what the enabling technologies are required to meet the requirements and lays out structured maturation paths. And it should include options, alternatives, and decision points for unforeseen events. And then there's the with what. With what resources and programs, funding lines, organizations, industry partners, acquisition pathways are you going to use? It ensures that this technology development is not occurring in isolation, but is synchronized with executable programs and budget realities. So finally, and then there's the when. All of this is occurring within a time phase structure, as we talked about. You've got your milestones, you've got your places where there are transition points, decision gates, and planned insertion opportunities. And of course, finally, the last part and the most important part is the risk assessment and mitigation throughout. Technical risks, integration risks, funding risks, and schedule risks should be identified early, or as they start to come about, should be able to, the roadmap should be adjusted accordingly. So in essence, a technology roadmap integrates mission need, requirements, technology development, resources, timing, and risk into one type of our architecture. So it's going to transform abstract capability into an executable and hopefully risk-informed pathway to delivery. So we can go on to the next
slide.
Yeah. So I'm going to just briefly walk everybody through what the this is what your it's really a TRL level, but it's what TRL is usually built into a government's roadmap. I'll give it just a broad overview. So at TRL level 1 and 2, basic scientific principles are observed and potential applications are formulated. Most of our stuff really doesn't get past this stuff, beyond that, because at TRL level 3 and 4 is usually the proof of concept. It's the engineering. What can we achieve through analytical and laboratory experiments? But if you make it through those, then you've got a level 4 where components are integrated and built and validated in a laboratory setting, establishing that the pieces actually can work together. 5 and 6, this is where it's actually being tested in relevant environments through rigorous systems. The system, its subsystems are being examined. And then you've got TRL 7, where you actually have a prototype demonstrated in an operational environment, showing it works in somewhat mission realistic conditions. And then 8 indicates the actual system has been completed and qualified through formal test and evaluation, and it meets design requirements. And then finally, you've got your 9, where you represent successful mission operations where the technology has been proven in the real world.
No, and that's fantastic. And I have to say, there are a lot of folks out there saying, okay, well, normally the 5 Ws include a who. Well, you should know who the who is. It should be you. But again, if your roadmap doesn't answer the why, the what, the how, the with what, and the when, and account for your risk, you just don't have a roadmap. You simply are putting out a wish list, right? And the Department of War, they don't fund wish lists, do they?
No. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that there is a acquisition clock versus innovation timeline. So for all innovators, everyone that has built something in the lab, I spent a number of years in the lab, 14 years building laser systems. One thing that we learned very, very early is that the government does not buy interesting technology, cool demos, or lab breakthroughs. It buys capabilities, programs that fall within acceptable risk boundaries. Whenever we start trying to stretch those, that's when we start having problems. Again, as I said before, there are studies after studies that reveal that misalignment between technology readiness levels and the program manifests itself as cost growth, time delays, cancellations, and in one program that I was involved in, complete restructuring of the program. At some point in the acquisition cycle, stakeholders want to have a strong idea of the limits and capabilities of the technology. They want, because that's what they're building around. And if the requirements get locked in before the technology is ready, development time and resources are usually put at risk.
You know, love the way that you put that. And I have to say, everyone needs to write this down. Okay. The government does not buy cool demos. Now, I know for a lot of you that put time and effort into those demos, that's going to sting. You've got a killer demo. Great. But you know what? If the maturity isn't there, then the manufacturing plan isn't there, and then the milestones don't line up, you're toast. It's not personal. It's physics. It's acquisition physics, basically. So now we're starting to really get tactical. So let's go ahead on to the next slide, please. So Christophe, for the folks in the audience who are thinking, all right, I get it, alignment matters, but what does that actually look like? And again, you talked about TRLs, that's technology readiness levels, right? It's kind of like a video game, right? And we saw that before, how it sort of weaves through. TRL1 is the tutorial and TRL9 is the final boss level. So if somebody is bringing something forward, where does their tech need to be on that scale, depending on the acquisition pathway, and what happens to companies that try to take shortcuts?
So the technology readiness level, it's not arbitrary, and you're going to find that in the research level, the development level, and deployment level, there are different programs that fit each one, whether it's from 6 to 1, 6 to 6.3, which usually covers the first 1 through 3, and then you have SBIRs, STTRs, which really focus on development. And then you've got your major capability acquisition technologies, which is usually the TRL is usually around 6 to 7 at program initiation. And then it can progress to TRL 7 to 8 before production, when operational demonstration and system qualifications are required. So MTA assumes that technologies are sufficiently mature around TR6. There has been a few TRL5s, though I don't know what their success rate is, but because of there's been such a pushback as far as this program is concerned, I'm assuming that TRL5 is not considered. It would be highly scrutinized if it was actually done. As I said before, government accountability office, the GAO, assessment has shown many times that when programs enter into these programs within immature technologies, development pipelines lengthen, TRL, and programs sometimes get canceled. So TRLs are really the program manager's way of being able to assess the maturity of the program, of the maturity of the technology, so that they can build something adequate around it.
Great. Thank you so much. So remember, folks, if you're sitting at a TRL 3 or 4 and you're trying to pitch into an MTA rapid prototyping program, you're essentially bringing a bicycle to the Daytona 500. Okay. It's just, you're going to get there eventually, but you're not winning the race and it's going to take you a lot longer. So you got to know where you are, you got to know where you need to be, and you need to build the roadmap to close that gap. It makes sense. Now, just want to give a quick reminder before we move on, that if you want to ask a question, we're going to save those questions until the end. And then we're going to be asking our panelists those questions, but go ahead and put them into the Q&A panel and we will review those and put them forward as we can, because I know some people I've already gotten an email saying I can't access the chat. So that's because it's not the chat, it's the Q&A function. So you just look for the Q&A button up at the top of your Teams window. All right, so let's go ahead to the next slide. Now, before we pivot from the technology side to the contracting side, we need to do a quick recap. Christophe, give us the bumper sticker version. If our audience remembers one framework from this first half, what should it be?
One sentence: road mapping, is really structured risk reduction. It is a way of providing a roadmap that deliberately aligns the technology maturity to the appropriate acquisition pathway, the appropriate program. If you're doing a roadmap, it should integrate all the manufacturing realities early. It synchronizes technical and acquisition stakeholders, and it should provide evidence to support milestone decisions. But if you do this, it increases your probability that a concept will successfully transition to a capability rather than stall in development. So without disciplined road mapping, innovation often remains experimental and fails to become operational capability. True speed in defense acquisition is not achieved by accelerating immature technology. It is achieved through alignment.
I love that.
Thank you.
Speed is achieved through alignment, not acceleration of immature technology. That needs to be a t-shirt. Folks, you got to put that on your wall right next to Live, Laugh, Love. Except this one is actually going to help you win contracts. Live, Laugh, Love is just going to help you win in life. All right. So Christophe, thank you so much for helping us cover the technology side of the house. Now we're going to flip the script literally, and we're going to hand the ball over to Kenyata to talk about the contracting side, because having a great roadmap is step one. Knowing how the government is going to evaluate you, select you, and structure that contract, that's the rest of the game. Kenyata, you ready to tag in here, sir?
I am. I think before we drive in, I just want to comment on one piece there that Christophe laid out before we jump into the contracting part of this, because he is 100% correct about the government doesn't, or in this case, Department of War doesn't buy demonstrations. Expectation management is critical, so that way you manage your outcomes, right? So you want to make sure that you understand that your demonstration is still useful. It proves to the government that your technology can work. And with further investigation or moderation, it's worth exploring more. All right. And so there's a difference between saying I'm investing in a demonstration that says it's worth because I want the government to be interested, versus one that says I'm trying to convince them to buy today. And so having that understanding of where Christophe is going is so critical when you transition into the contract side of it. So Christophe, kudos, man. Great point to make.
No, and that is fantastic. And, and I have to say, you have probably through your years of service seen plenty of that, seen where, somebody comes in and it's all flash, but there's no substance. And, you've got to be careful about that, folks, because again, we talked about what you're selling and whether it's mature enough. Now we need to talk about how the government is actually going to structure that buy. And it's not going to start with a really flashy demo. It's going to start with a solid proof that you're going to be able to make this happen. So Kenyata, walk us through the contracting elements of an acquisition strategy. And I'm going to warn the audience, this is where it starts to feel like law school meets project management. But I promise you, if there's anybody who's going to make it make sense, KW is the man. So go ahead, counselor, hit us with it.
So, Christophe uses a set of analogy or examples that I love, which is, and I often told my kids when they were coming up that if I would have known how often that I was going to use who, what, when, where, why, and how, I would have paid so much more attention in English class. The who, what, when, where, why, and how, that's going to continue throughout the theme that I talk about with the acquisition strategy and act plans as we go a little bit further. You think about it, there's 5 core principles that the government is thinking through when they're developing an acquisition strategy. You're going to know why I'm emphasizing strategy in just a second. Think about your business or contract strategy. It's defining the approach for the competition, source selection, contract type, and incentives, if there are any, and whether or not to even have incentives in the first place. Thinking through, how do I manage my risk? But before I manage risk, I've got to identify my risk. Then I've got to talk through and assess those risks. And then I want to moderate or mitigate those risks. And you typically outline them in those strategies. And you do that on cost, schedule, and performance. Cost, schedule, and performance. Then you sit down and say, okay, from there, what are my data needs, my technical needs, software needs? Is there any intellectual property involved? And if so, was this invested in by the government previously? So does the government already have government purpose rights? Or will we be investing in it on our end to make it more, to modify it in order to fit the department's needs? And then therefore, if so, potentially negotiating government purpose rights for the system that we're working with any contractor on when you're on that side of the house. When we're on this side of the house, on the industry side, we're thinking, man, the government is asking for government purpose rights. Well, the question I would ask is, Mr. Government, how are you investing in this? Are you paying for some of those concepts that you want to be added? Or has that already been defined and compensated through my normal structure? And then I would sit down and say, okay, the life cycle, product support, logistics. How will a system be supported throughout its entire life cycle? The term you will often hear is the sustainment cost. What are the sustainment costs, the sustainment timelines when it comes to systems? And then you'll hear the competition strategy, how to maximize the competition. And this includes whether to make something a small business set aside, or further down, woman-owned small business, service-disabled veteran small business set aside, or some other socioeconomic category. Sometimes the government says, I just want to make it a small business because that's what the market research says. And sometimes the government says, hey, it's in the government's best interest in order to maximize competition, to go full and open. And then it can make that decision working with the contracting officer as well as the program office and the small business administration. I want people to understand that there is a strategic rationale why the government is buying this way. And then we walk through how they apply it soon after. Rick?
No, and that's fantastic because, the acquisition strategy is basically the government's game plan, right? It's not just what do we need, it's how are we going to compete it, manage the risk, handle the IP, support it for years, and make sure that a non-traditional business gets a fair shot. So if you are a non-traditional business watching this, the last one should have your ears perked up. They're required to think about you. So keep that in mind. Let's go ahead into the next slide and let's talk about the actual plan. Kenyata, this next one is something that I think trips up a lot of people. And I'll admit, it tripped me up too the first time I saw it. We've been saying acquisition strategy and acquisition plan kind of interchangeably, but they're not the same thing, are they? It's kind of like the difference between a game plan and the actual playbook. One is the philosophy, the other is play by play. So go ahead and break it down for us. What goes into an acquisition plan under FAR 7.105 and how is it different from the strategy?
Yeah, it's a really good question for those who are just coming in to understand how to do business with the government, how the government thinks and processes documentation for contracts. But it's also even good question for people who are experienced because you might pick up a little bit of nuance on how the government operates that even for the most experienced of companies. And that act plan is different from the strategy because it sits down and it focuses on how we bring it to life, right? It defines the requirement, the need, the cost, and the schedule goals. And it's an actual plan of action, right? And it details the steps and the milestones for the entire procurement process. And we sit down and say, okay, in that document, we identify the contract type, the selection of the contract type. So not just identifying it, but the actual selection. And so then we have to document the chosen structure. So whether it's firm fixed price, cost reimbursable, OTA, or any other kind of contract type that the government chooses it wants to use. The next phase is one of the most important. It's not the most, but one of the most important for industry to understand, which is the evaluation factors. What criteria is the government going to use to select its winner or winners, plural? And in there, it also identifies the management information. So who's your core, the approval level of authorities for the contract, and then key differences between when you're sitting there saying, okay, I got it. What are the differences, though, between a plan and a strategy? The strategy is broad, strategic. The plan is tactical, little bit of operational sprinkled in. The purpose starts laying into it. The strategy justifies the approach, and the plan outlines the execution, the step-by-step execution. Flexibility goes in. The strategy can evolve as the risks change, and the plan is a formal document requiring revision. So that means once the government has signed off on that plan, if anything changes, we had to go back and formalize that change and identify the world and all the stakeholders. And then the timing. The strategy is developed very early. In fact, it's being developed alongside those steps that Christophe was mentioning earlier. So it's a little bit of simultaneous development because as the program office is learning more, they are working with the contracting office simultaneously to actually develop and document that. And then the plan, it comes a little bit later because it's derived from the strategy. And then it's updated at key milestones to say, are they actually on schedule? Is it driving in the way that it was planned? And then from a regulatory basis, if you're out there trying to figure out, man, how do I go research this and have it? Well, Rick gave you one part. FAR Part 7. And then you also want to look up the DOD instruction. Some people often call it DOD 5000, right? And so it allows for us to actually lay out for the rest of the world to understand the process. And so that's where that is documented and laid out. And that's how the government functions. I would state, just for the record, in some scenarios, the government can seek to combine an act strategy, act plan in one document if certain conditions are met.
All right, let's go ahead and jump to the next slide so we can sort of go through this. So again, when you're looking at the strategy, you're looking at the why and how at about 30,000 feet, and the plan is the who, what, and when that are on the ground. And again, Kenyata just laid it out with a pro tip that he just dropped in your lap, and you should be thankful for it. Sometimes they can merge into one document. So when you're reading a solicitation and trying to understand the government's thinking, know which one you're looking at because it changes how you should respond. All right, everybody good so far? Good. So let's go ahead and get into source selection, which is where the rubber really meets the road. So let's jump to the next slide. So Kenyata, now we're getting to the part that makes or breaks your proposal. This is the source selection plan. This is the government's internal playbook for how they're going to evaluate this next thing that's going to come along. And I always tell people, Understanding the source selection process is like understanding how the judges score on Dancing with the Stars. Somebody could be the best dancer, but if they don't know they're looking for footwork and not freestyle, they're going home. So help us by walking us through what a source selection plan includes and what contractors absolutely positively need to know about it.
Yeah, I love that analogy with the Dancing of the Stars, because it's actually very fitting for source selection, because a lot of people have in their mind, when they're building technology, what's important to them. I often try to tell up and coming contractors and even some veteran contractors, you might know your technology and you know what's important to you, but you're selling it to someone else. So you need to do two things. You need to make sure that you understand what's important to them, and also be able to document and explain in writing how what you provide handles what matters to them. Well, if you want to know what matters to them, you started off in the market research phase when the government was asking questions and trying to figure out what was out in the marketplace. But then when it gets to the serious piece, after Christophe and the technical team have gone through and they've discovered technology levels and figured out what's out there and what they really want, it's documented in a source selection plan. And it's laid out the organization's responsibilities, because it's saying to you in that plan, the technology is going to be used in this office. Here are my scope and my responsibilities in this office. That's why I need what I need. Second, it starts saying, okay, I identify that there's going to be a source selection authority or decision maker. Sometimes a source selection authority council. It's not always needed for a council, but that council breaks down what the source selection evaluation board, or SSEB, does when they're reading the technology proposals to figure out if what you provided meets the standard. So who those players are and all of the levels that are going to be evaluating it, they're set up for a reason, because one person can sometimes be corruptible or making a mistake or things of that nature. But when you have multiple layers of boards verifying the technology and making sure it answers the mail, there's less apt for mistakes. Then it sits down and says, are there factors and sub-factors? Well, if they are, they're identified in that plan up front. And then it's flushed out that says it's going to be technical capability. Which technical capability is important? And if there's any weighted factors, then it'll say, okay, past performance. Have you done this before and delivered this someplace before in this marketplace? And the cost and price. Is this affordable? Can I afford this with the amount of money that Congress has allocated to me? It is very important to understand that all of those are outlined in advance in that plan. And then it says, okay, how I'm going to evaluate that plan. So just because I said there's technical factors and past performance, well, the government has to tell you how they're going to use whatever it is they're evaluating. And you have to stick to that throughout the process, or start over and go back and say, hey, now that I know more, I need to change this. This is really important step in the process. The government cannot just change its methodology or approach that was issued in the source selection plan without going back to document those changes and why they changed it. You sit down and say, okay, it's going to be done outstanding, good, or whether it's going to be acceptable or non-acceptable. The security confidentiality is outlined. And then, of course, documentation of that plan, meaning is the process for documenting the results that it has to go through for final selection decision. It outlines that entire plan. Then it says, okay, what are the requirements? What's mandatory? Has to be finalized before the solicitation is actually released. It cannot be done afterward. It has to be done before. And it says the reason it's that way is because it has to be done before proposals come in, because they don't want to have the appearance of bias. They want to sit down and say, okay, Who is the SSA? Sometimes it's a contracting officer, sometimes it's the head of the contracting activity, and sometimes it's the program senior official. Then it's okay, what's in the detail? Evaluation factors of relative importance. Technical is significantly more than cost, or past performance is more important. That's where it's outlined first. Then it says the evaluation team composition, technical experts, legal counsel, small business, cost and pricers, all of those kinds of folks, who's on the team and why they're there. The scoring methodology and rationale, the acquisition timetable to award, so industry can know exactly what timetable the government is looking to award and make plans for award. Procedures often are discussed with offerers and what the competitive range would look like and how someone can make that competitive range. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So when you get to this chart, Rick, start talking through the contracting sections.
So when we're talking about contracting sections, right? We're now entering what I like to call the holy trinity of government solicitations. You got section H, you got section L, you got section M. And for anyone who's ever looked at a federal solicitation and felt like they needed a Rosetta Stone and a law degree just to find the table of contents, this is going to be a segment that's going to be for you. So we need to start with the overview. We'll go one by one. Give us the 10,000-foot view. What are sections H, L, and M? Why should every single person watching this webinar be able to recite them in their sleep?
Well, I don't want them that bored to where they're reciting them in their sleep. They might keep their spouse up at night. But I will tell you, it is still definitely important. And the reason it's important is because it tells you where to look for critical information. All right. If you sit back and you think about section H, that's your special requirements. All right. You're talking about things that are unique, not in the FAR most often. So there's special clauses, things that you're going to be held accountable to meet. All right. Key personnel requirements are often in your section H. All right. If the government says, I'm not going to tell you how many people you need, I'm not going to tell you your approach, but I am going to tell you these key positions are important to us. Whatever solution you propose must have these kinds of positions or these specific positions. It would be identified most often in section H. And then you're sitting down and you're saying, okay, if there's any security clearance requirements, if there's going to be any government furnished property or any agency specific rules, all of that's in section H. It often contains any hidden cost or insurance minimums, workforce transition requirements, and then sometimes anything that might be negotiable before award is also inside there. Then you go into the next critical section that is often there. And I need to highlight that just because we're talking about H, L, and M, it does not mean that the other sections are not valuable. It's just this sometimes is where the meat and where most of the time is spent. Section L is your instructions, conditions, notice to offerers, your roadmap for how to prepare and how to submit. How to prepare and how to submit. You're talking about specifies different mandatory sections, page limits, font sizes, formatting, separate volumes. Listen, everybody, you might not think that your proposal can be thrown out for the wrong font size, but it can, and it will be quite often. We've had people, the government specified 12 or 14 font because it needs to be legible. They need to be able to read it without a magnifying glass. And some people, because they're trying to fit the page count, will go all the way down to a size 6 font and wonder why the government missed something and want to file a protest later, right? So the font size is there to ensure that your proposal is legible, all right? that's just an example of why something that for industry may sometimes seem small, but it's massive in maintaining fairness, fair treatment, and that each proposal gets a fair look and examination. The date and time, location, any electronic formats, all of that is outlined in L. Failure to meet or follow Section L can sometimes get your proposal rejected without even the government reviewing it. So you could have an outstanding technical proposal, but because you didn't follow instructions, the government can legally eliminate you. Section M is all about how it's evaluated. So remember, you heard me talk about how your proposal will be rated up earlier. Well, now we get into how you break down and use that. So it tells you exactly how the government's going to evaluate your technical, your past performance, what language it's requiring for you to meet. And so you want to go over that and make sure that when you're done with your proposal, that you have crosswalked it to ensure that all of these things are met. It goes into your relative importance. Is technical more important, or is past performance more important? Is price more important? Each solicitation is different. Okay? Are there sub-factors? And each of those sub-factors rated separately? Or will they be rolled up into the larger factor? All of that's outlined in Section M. It tells you whether it is best value trade-off or best value LPTA. And yes, everyone, regardless of how we might feel, LPTA is considered in the FAR a best value solution. Explains the basis for establishing the competitive range prior to making award. So knowing if you are still in the competitive running, that's where that is. Does that make sense, Rick?
That makes perfect sense. And I have to say, for those of you who think LPTA might be a transportation authority bus, it is lowest price technically acceptable. And, to translate, I guess I would say Section L is the recipe. Section M is how the judges score the dish. And Section H is the fine print that tells you the kitchen has a gas stove, not electric. So you better plan accordingly, right? I love my analogies. So we've gone from Dancing with the Stars to Chopped. But that's okay, because that's what happens with a lot of these folks. They get chopped. So if we take a look at the proposal blueprint, right, we're going to start with Section L. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Because again, this is the one that if you get it wrong, nothing else matters, right? I've heard horror stories of companies spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a proposal only to have it thrown out because they used the wrong font size, like you were saying. I cannot confirm nor deny on a proposal that said the 12 point was the minimum acceptable font of using a font of 11.95, just because I needed to get one more word on a page. I cannot confirm nor deny that. But again, you use the wrong font. You exceed the page limit by half a page. It's like getting a parking ticket at the Super Bowl. You made it to the game, but you're just not getting in because they're towing your vehicle away, and you got to go over to the salvage yard to get it. So how exactly should companies approach Section L?
Yeah, this is funny. This is just Kenyata's recommendation. This is not something you have to do. I just sit back and I would tell you all, start with structure by the instruction. Structure by the instruction. Meaning, try to make it mirror. That way it will make it easier for whoever your proofreader is, whoever the government is that's saying these guys met all of our requirements. They can do a side-by-side comparison with their checklist to make sure everything aligns. Make it easy. If you make it complicated, you are creating room for error. All right? It requires volume numbers and section titles, everything. So make sure that those things match. It'll make evaluating your proposal easier. I always used to tell my employees when they came up for an evaluation, Go back and look at what your standards were, what were your goals for the year, and let's write your response according to that, because it allows me to easier track your accomplishments. Well, this is the same thing in a proposal. Make it easy for the government to choose you. Do not make it hard. Follow the formatting rules to the letter. I will neither confirm or deny Rick's story about him doing a 0.95, but I will tell you, I would not recommend that. If it was 12, do 12. Because if they go up and they actually scan that or open it up electronically and click and it comes up 11.95 legally, they can eliminate you. It's not about it rounds up. Rounding is not a thing. So make sure that you are really following hidden requirements, right? It's not really hidden. It's just not in the normal place like a H or an M. So you want to make sure that you are reading that to document the special formatting rules or special requirements, especially if it's going to go into your statement of work or your performance work statement. Identify that that's where it is. Tell the government that I addressed this section in my performance work statement or my statement of work, so they know exactly where to go look. Compliance matrix, build a I can't emphasize this enough. A compliance matrix makes or breaks the reviewer on your team, because it helps them identify and speed up the review process so that it can be submitted on time, or catch if something was missed, so it can be fixed and repaired before submission. All right. I think it's so important. If there's a gap, fix it before submission. Do not use the government as your quality check team. That is not their job. They are not required by law to do that. And so you can file all the protests you want. You will more than likely lose because you tried to use the government as your quality team instead of your own quality matrix. Make sense, Rick?
No. Yeah, and that really is a perfect point. That with the compliance matrix, it's your pre-flight checklist. You don't want to find out that the wheel's going to fall off the plane as the plane is going down the runway. You really want to make sure that happens before. Pilots don't just eyeball whether the landing gear actually works. They actually check every item every single time. So it's the same energy. Build the matrix, work the matrix, trust the matrix, have that third party that's objective to you looking at it, and not just someone who's going to say, yeah, that looks perfect, and then expect the government to tell you what exactly went wrong with everything that you just submitted. So now we're going to go on to section M. And, I called this the answer key a minute ago, and I wasn't joking. It's literally the government telling you, here's what we care about, and here's how much we care about it. Like a professor handing out the final exam rubric on the first day of class. If you ignore it, that's on you. But so tell companies, how should they use section M to their advantage?
Yeah, I often tell people that when I was on the government side, I would tell contractors, I'm telling you the what. I'm telling you the what I need, and I'm telling you how I need it or how important it is. Remember we talked about who, what, when, where, why, and how? Well, this is another form of where it's at. But now I need you to tell me how you're going to implement it, how you're going to execute, how you're going to bring my needs to life or to bear fruit, right? So the easiest ways to do that is mirror the evaluation. You may have a different methodology and approach in your company, and that's okay. But this is the easier way to do it to ensure compliance. Compliance is critical in dealing with the federal government space. Structure your proposal so evaluators can easily find the information. You're going to hear me repeat that several times over. Do not make it hard for the government to look out for you, to evaluate you, and be fair to you. Do not make it hard. Make it easy. Use this, put it where they can easily find the information so they can have the ability to score you high as you have earned. High as you have earned. Use the exact language in some cases where it mitigates the the confusion of terminology, right? Because if you can sometimes document that I understood you by telling the government, this is how I am going to do it using their language, it allows them to say they understand me. Okay. Make your evaluator's job as easy as possible. Prioritize the high weighted areas. Make sure you're looking at your technical management. If it's weighted more heavily than price, make sure that you pour the resources in that volume to ensure that it can be done. You don't give everything equal effort unless you have started having the amount of time at the beginning, meaning you have been on this a year early. You had time to respond to all the market research. So you've been prepping as you go. If you are seeing this at the last minute and you have to prioritize sections, sometimes you look at what's weighted the highest. Okay. Quantify your value. I can't emphasize this enough. You will hear me anywhere you hear me talk. You will hear me talk about value proposition. What is the value you bring to the government in this solicitation response? Okay. We have extensive experience in this area. We completed 14 similar contracts over 6 years, 99% on delivery rate. Performed within budget or under budget. You want to be very linked up to all the criteria. Does that make sense, Rick?
No, that makes perfect sense. And, you know, I have to say this as a communications guy, I think use their language. That is a point that is just pure gold, because there are so many people that want to do the Joey from Friends thing and just break out the thesaurus because they're tired of using the same language that the government's using. But if the solicitation calls it a technical capability and you call it engineering prowess in your proposal, they might completely overlook that and say, well, they're not giving us what we're looking for. Because a lot of times, again, when they're scanning these things, they're scanning for those key terms. You're not writing poetry. You're not composing jazz. You're writing a compliance document. So you got to make it easy for the evaluator to check the box, because at the end of the day, you get an evaluator who's had a really long day. The dog was up late. The kid was up early. They're on their 15th proposal that is in 11.95 font, and they've noticed it, and they're just not in a good mood. They're not going to go hunting for your great answer. It needs to be right where they expect it. So if we go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about the, absolutely last but not least in the Trinity, section H. I call this the fine print that bites, because this is where companies get surprised after they've already won. It's kind of like buying a house and then finding out that the HOA requires you to paint your mailbox mauve on alternating Thursdays, and you don't ever realize that. And the next thing you know, you're either getting kicked out or you're getting, a fine or something. So what do contractors really need to watch out for when they're looking at Section H?
Nobody wants to hear me get on the HOA soapbox, Rick. I'm very anti-HOAs. They don't want to hear me on that one. I will state that when you sit down and think about it, the way I often refer to this for people to make it easy for them is think of it about a way to identify things that will cost you or your company money, so it can be included in your price proposal and it's not caught off guard and you have to eat those costs. Because there's no guarantee that the government will give you a modification after award for something that you made a mistake in not bidding. A bid mistake is at the government's discretion whether they want to make you perform or tell you, yeah, I'm willing to give you a mod. I can see it was an honest mistake. Typically, that doesn't happen unless the language was confusing. Okay, so my point is telling you, you read this thoroughly. So you want to talk about whether there's some badging requirements. Are you responsible to cover those badges or the materials used in those badges? Are there any facilities that you need to have or have access to? Are there specific task order procedures, processes that make the time linger on? So now it's more, instead of taking 4 hours to do something, it takes 12 hours to do something, because the government sometimes will identify specific procedures that it wants done regardless of whether you think it's inefficient or not. And therefore, you will have to meet it. And if you have to meet it, you want to include the cost for it. Ensure compliance in both volumes, meaning requirements in H must be reflected in your technical approach. So crosswalk them and outline that they are there. And make sure it's properly priced in your cost volume. If it's in H, it needs to show up in your numbers. Unless you are saying, I can do it for a cost that's inclusive for my other items. Okay? Never take exceptions. This is critical. Do not take exceptions for a Section H clause. If something is ambiguous, use the Q&A process to ask for clarification. It is okay to do that. You are not frustrating the government. Taking exception can make your entire proposal not compliant if you fail to answer something or address something. So ensure that if it's confusing to you, go back and ask. All right. Does it make sense, Rick? Does that,
No,
as the moderator,
absolutely.
did that hit with you?
Absolutely makes sense. And you know what, folks, if I could, it was verbal, but if it were written, never take exceptions. I want to underline that point 3 times and circle it and draw an arrow to it. You know, because I have absolutely seen companies think that they're being clever by saying we take exception to this clause, and then they wonder why they got bounced. Look, the government, they write the rules. You have to play by the rules. If the rules don't make sense, you get to ask a question. Like Kenyata said, you've got a Q&A period. But if you just go rogue in your proposal, that's just going to get really, really ugly, really, really fast. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. There we go. So we're coming into the home stretch. We know that we've gone a little long today, but that's okay, folks. Thanks for giving us a little more than an hour today. Kenyata, give us the 3 golden rules, the things that if our audience does nothing else, will make them better proposal writers tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I would say start with your combined matrix. Make sure that your matrix or checklist is there. Make sure whoever created it is good at details. Make sure that they can see the details and make so that way you don't miss anything. I would do it sections H, L, and M in order together so you can see how they interconnect. If something bleeds over into another sections, that you've addressed it or identified where it is addressed. So that way the government knows it was accomplished. Adopt the evaluator mindset, right? Adopt the evaluator mindset. And basically what I mean by that is saying, if you were on the other side having to evaluate your proposal, but it wasn't your proposal, how would you see it? I think it's very important to understand how they will judge you, not just what they want to buy, because it helps you write better, helps you write more completely. Think like the evaluator and score it yourself before they do. If you wrote it and you don't think you can be objective, get another battle buddy in your company who has really good objective mindset to read it and see if it's met a second set of eyes, so to speak. And rule 3, don't be late. Submit on time. Look at the section L instructions. Be timely for submission. The government cannot accept late proposals, period. Stop. Don't pass go. They don't like to hear, well, my email was slow. We're going to look at that server and see when it hit that server. If it hit that server late, then it is not acceptable. It is important to get that. Be on time.
That's right. That's right. No, they don't care. They don't care if there was a blizzard, your internet was down. You got to plan for the worst. You got to submit early. It is, it's quite frankly, the old military mindset of if you're, 15 minutes early, you're 30 minutes late. Because guess what? 5 minutes late is the saddest sentence in government contracting. All right, so I don't know about all of you, but I feel like I just got a master class in, about the last, 55 minutes. Let's go ahead and try to wrap this all up with a bow. We have one question right now that is published. Who do we talk to start the process of introducing a technology to the government? We have a complete tech and a working prototype, but we have yet to find the right person to direct us.
So it varies. If you are a small company or small not-for-profit, I would tell you the first place to start would be the small business professionals within that office or organization. Each major command has small business professionals that are paid to sit down and have the conversation with you in detail and where to go. Sometimes you may not live close enough to a small business professional's office, so you might want to look at the Apex accelerators. They are a not completely free, but predominantly free section of the government that is run with technical advisors, computer advisors, all kinds of brilliant people that will allow you access to their knowledge base, so that way you can they'll go through your charts with you sometimes and make sure your pitch is right. Figure out where your technology best fits. Sometimes the place you think it fits might not be the best place, or it might be one of the best places, because I've seen people bring things into my office when I was working in a small business office. They would say, Kenyata, I want to go to XCOM. And I would laugh and I said, I'll get you in the XCOM, but I'm also going to get you in the BCOM and 123Com, because they also need this. Did you look at their top 5 challenges, their top 10 challenges that they're trying to solve this year? This fits that. And so then we go through and figure out how to create a pitch deck for each of them, because you can't use a standardized deck. You need to write one that is specific to their needs that they're trying to solve. And if you do that, you have a better propensity to hit the right nerve with them. So they go, oh, this company understands me. This company understands what I'm trying to solve, and they have either a basic solution, primary solution, or premium solution. But either way, you're walking down the path of solution. The government right now is looking for solutions. So if your tech meets a need, or you're not sure if it meets a need that is primary to their top 10 challenges, make sure that you are looking with that or going over that with the small business professionals and the Apex accelerators. They are really great at that.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, because we're over, we're going to go ahead and call that a wrap. I'm going to say anybody who has any questions that haven't gotten answered or asked, actually, because there were no other questions in the queue. If there was a question you didn't get to ask, please go ahead and send it to communications@moveamerica.org. We will make sure that our experts go ahead and answer those questions. So I want to wrap things up and say a massive thank you to Christophe, McCray, and Kenyata Wesley for absolutely crushing it today. Gentlemen, if this webinar were a movie, Christophe, you'd be the guy who builds the Iron Man suit. Kenyata, you'd be the guy who handles the Stark Industries government contracts to mass produce it. I would simply be Happy Hogan, trying to keep everybody safe and asking everybody where their ID card is. Now, listen, if you got value out of today, I need you to do 3 things. 3 things. That's it. Even my 14-year-old can handle 3 things, at least most of the time. Number 1, I want you to follow us on LinkedIn @moveamerica.org or @moveamerica.org. We post updates, insights, upcoming events, and the kind of content that makes you smarter about the defense industrial base while you're scrolling past your cousin's vacation photos. So again, hit that follow button like your next contract depends on it, because honestly, it might. Number 2, I want you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are building out a library of webinars, interviews, deep dives like this one, podcasts, the whole 9 yards. Hit the notification bell, do the whole thing. We're not quite at Taylor Swift era store numbers yet, but with your help, we're going to start getting there. Government contracting is our era, and we are just getting started. And number three, I want you to go check out our brand new website at moveamerica.org. It's a fresh look, fresh resources, but the same mission. We are helping non-traditional businesses break into and thrive in the defense industrial base. Seriously, go poke around the website. There's good stuff there. It's like the new season of your favorite show just dropped, except instead of plot twists, it's procurement strategies, which, let's be real, in this world, it's kind of the same level of drama. Remember, Move America is here to help you navigate this landscape and win, not just compete, not just participate, but win. That's what Move America does. So, Christophe, thank you so much, sir. Kenyata, thank you so much, sir. I also want to say thank you to Meg Pace for running this webinar, keeping everything on track, and making sure that I didn't say anything too stupid. All right. Folks, go build that roadmap, decode that solicitation, map those sections H, L, and M like your business depends on it because, and I cannot stress this enough, it does. I want to say to everyone watching, thanks so much for your time, your attention, and your commitment to helping me get better at this. We'll definitely see you at the next one. Take care, everyone. Have yourself a great day.
If you still have questions, just shoot us an email. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to connect with us on LinkedIn for monthly newsletters and webinar updates. And check out our website for even more resources and ways to get involved. Thanks for watching.